So are you happy with the way sea bass, fluke, porgies, and bluefish are managed? That's a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer it. I'm Jim Hutchinson with the New Jersey, Delaware Bay edition of the Fisherman magazine. And a dozen years ago this winter, 5,000 or 6,000 of my favorite fishing buddies joined together on Capitol Hill in a quest to try to reform the federal fisheries law, which is the Magnuson-Stevenson Act. We had a number of powerful, high-profile members of Congress who stood before the crowd that day making big promises about fixing this broken system. But 12 years later, we have not seen much change incorporated. For New Jersey and Delaware anglers, on Monday, March 28th, from 6 to 8 p.m., there's an online meeting to get public comment on something called the Recreational Harvest Control Rule for the summer flounder, scup, and black sea bass fishery management plan, as well as for bluefish. Now, this so-called recreational reform initiative proposes an alternate set of measures for managing our fisheries in 2023 and beyond. It includes the potential for multi-year regulations instead of doing it 1 year at a clip every year. It would take stock status and other key indicators into consideration when setting these regulations. So let's use fluke and sea bass as perfect examples. Regulations are set annually by comparing the previous year's catch to next year's quota. This is done by using the random MRIP data, the Marine Recreational Information Program, based on dockside random surveys and that database of anglers where people get contacted at random. If catch data exceeds the assigned quota, you will get more restrictive regulations. If it's less, then you get some liberalization in your limits. The problem, as any council or commission rep will tell you, is that this system does not take into account the stock status. Sea bass, for example. That's a fishery that's been totally rebuilt, and yet because of last year's highly speculative MRIP data, we're forced to take more restrictive measures in 2022. Doesn't make sense, right? On the converse, the other hand, summer flounder, we had lower MRIP catch numbers compared to our quota. That fishery is not yet totally rebuilt, yet we're looking at liberalization in 2022. Confusing. Certainly is. Or as the Recreational Fishing Alliance put it in an email blast this week, it's kind of screwy. Together with the folks from the American Sportfishing Association, RFA, and other recreational advocates have been working hard on this recreational reform initiative, essentially so that stock status would need to be incorporated into any management decisions. That way, regulations can be based in some part on the health of a fishery to help set those seasons, sizes, and bags for multiple years across the board, maybe 3 or 4 years at a clip, instead of having these knee-jerk annual reactions that we have in place now for fluke and sea bass. Use New Jersey, for example. We are at the end of March, yet we still don't know what the 2022 regulations for fluke and sea bass will be. Now, I wrote up this recreational reform initiative for our November 2021 edition, the New Jersey, Delaware Bay edition of the Fisherman magazine, and we recently sent an email blast out to all of our readers about these online hearings. Now I would ask you to visit thefisherman.com again, where this YouTube is sitting on a special page. It's called New Jersey, Delaware Hearing on Recreational Reform. Take a look at the action items that are contained on that page. First of all, register for this webinar on March 28th. If you fish New Jersey waters, Delaware waters, if you're in Delaware, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, guys fishing out of Staten Island, this one is especially for you. Secondly, sign the American Sportfishing Association's petition to support management reform for fluke, sea bass, porgies, and bluefish, unless, of course, you're happy with the way that management is going at this rate. Now, I've spoken to a couple of folks on the inside, folks who've talked to representatives at the council and commission who say there are folks actively lobbying against this reform. Some of them, obviously, the commercial sector doesn't want this, but I'm even finding out some recreational advocates, the Association of America's Saltwater Googans, I guess. I'm not sure what their problem is with us folks who like to fish for bottom fish, but perhaps they're happy casting silver spoons at bluefish. But if you agree that we need some changes, click on the ASA's Guide to the Recreational Harvest Control rule draft agenda framework. A mouthful, I'm sure, but there's an inclusion there in a decision tree that you can click on, and it'll take you through the various options. Clicking through, if I select B, it'll do this. If I select C, it'll do this. I will tell you that I plan on attending Monday's hearing myself because I have some questions. For one, the fisheries managers are claiming one of these options, B, the percent change approach option, is most like status quo in terms of its relationship to MRIP. However, MRIP is needed for all of these options. CDE as well. MRIP is what we're going to be basing it on. The inflexibility of our federal fisheries law coupled with this random survey data, that's what's giving us the problems right now. And I'm sure that if we select one of the options, we can go back and do some other manipulations down the road. But as you sit through this Monday night hearing, keep this in mind. Is a bird in the hand worth two in the bush? At this point in the fisheries management process, told you, we've been working on this for 12 years, 20 years. In speaking to folks from the Recreational Fishing Alliance, they seem to be settling in on option B. Even if the one example under option B in this decision tree doesn't look like it's the most optimal for 2022. However, the potential for getting another couple of birds down the road after so many years of sacrifice, I don't know. I can't help but think we could certainly do better. Also, keep this in mind. Options C, D, and E rely on model approaches that are still under development. So while the initial belief is that these other options may be preferred in the short term, the process has yet to be defined. So what will that mean in the long run? To me, that's like trusting another round of government promises made in front of 5,000 angry fishermen. Hey, we're from the government. We're here to help us. Trust us. Look, just like fishing, democracy is not a spectator sport. You do it because you live it, breathe it, love it, bleed it. And Monday, March 28th is your chance to chime in on the future of fluke, sea bass, porgy, and bluefish management. And instead of gathering by the thousands on Capitol Hill, perhaps we have a shot at working within this broken system to reform recreational fisheries management for the future by attending the meeting online. Again, look for New Jersey, Delaware hearing on recreational reform for all the details exclusively at thefisherman.com.